The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it's Wednesday.
Is it really? Well, before we get into anything,
Hump
we've
day.
got to go to this video clip.
Joseph Camara.
Here, and this is very sad.
Stephen Camara.
Here.
La Liberty LeBeau. Long.
Here.
Mitchell. Pereira. Ponte. President Gadim. A quorum not being present, this meeting is hereby adjourned.
You have watched this lack of a city council meeting. No, it's you know, right out of the get-go, CJ, there's a question whether that meeting even should have been called.
Correct.
Because of the, you know, as you produced yesterday, and I heard much to their chagrin, a copy of the rules of order, which
An actual copy, not some.
which is very difficult to find in today's day and age.
Actually, I have a hard copy
Of Cushing's?
copy of Cushing's coming in. I found it after months and months and months of searching. I got it for $18.50 and $6 in shipping. The next cheapest copy I could find was $2,750.
Well, you're a tad low on the audio, see, but just a tad, not much. But I can hear you. But
Yeah, no, I think it's the speaker in there. I might have turned it down a little too much.
Yeah. So it's you're perfect now. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you know, there's a question. You know, he basically submitted fundamentally the same thing, and you know, people can. I think you posted it, didn't you? Did you post the Cushing's?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so anybody that wants to, you know, we're not gonna, you know, we're not gonna argue or debate or read it to you. Go on to our site and read it, and you'll see clearly that I think the fundamental premise of the language says that if you refer something to committee, then allow someone to circumvent that committee by continually putting in more proposals to kind of override it. You know, you've basically created chaos and confusion, and that's not what rules of order are there for.
Right. It's Chapter 3, Section 2, subsection 1906 and 1907, and it says very clearly in that if the main body was allowed to constantly take it back and make changes, it would inhibit the dispatch of business.
Well, I mean, I think that's fairly clear, but of course they're going to contest it and.
Well, I got into a fight. Well, I shouldn't say a fight. We got into a discussion, a loud discussion, with corporate counsel and city administrator. You know, and I said, look, they don't have a quorum. Therefore, you cannot have a meeting. And the corporate counsel was trying to tell Inez, well, they can have the meeting and discuss this issue. And she said, no, you can't. There's no quorum. There's no meeting. And it was almost like he was saying, you're going to have this meeting any way you want. And I said, you cannot have the meeting because there is no quorum. Yes, they can. That's exactly what he said to me. And there were witnesses.
Yeah. Well.
Okay? And remember, he's the law.
Well, I think that's the fundamental problem we have with him. You know, he was a judge, and in his courtroom, you know, he is the final rule unless he's overruled by a superior court. And I think at one time he was censured for doing something procedurally wrong. But the fact is that, you know, this is a different venue, and apparently he doesn't understand that. You know, it's like, this is not a courtroom, this is a public body. And rules of order for various organizations are there, and that's how these organizations will run. You have to abide by the rules of procedure. just as he has to live by the rule of law in a courtroom. Well, you just can't say because you wanted the mayor and you're the mayor's lawyer that you wanted them to bash everybody who didn't show up. But as I said, procedurally, it's right there. Read it. I don't care whether you agree or disagree. It's a fact. That is right out of Cushing's, and that is the set of parliamentary rules that the city council follows. Therefore, they are obligated to live by those rules. So that right out of the gate says that meeting should have probably never been called, and then we can get into 5 or 6 other reasons why it shouldn't have been called, and why the people who didn't show up were actually doing everybody a favor.
Well, the thing is that, Kathy Ann even joined in on the heated discussion about the Cushing's rule. And she goes, oh, so there is a motion to vacate. I said, it's quite apparent that the rules only apply to the arguer. So even if the rule doesn't exist, it applies.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
Now, here's the difference, and this is what people don't understand. Had the mayor, because the mayor can only call a meeting of the full body under 2-55. Had he reached out and cooperated, there's a word, cooperated with the city council president and said, I'm calling this meeting of the city council. Can you call a special meeting of the committee on finance prior to this meeting? Then it would have been in finance. They could have brought it out of finance, referred it to the full council, and then the council could have said yay or nay on it. That would have been the proper procedure. But again, the proper procedure doesn't seem to happen. No. But I'm going to turn it over to you because you need to explain to these nitwits, yes, you're nitwits, why this was beneficial to the Teamsters. Because Matt Taibbi and I got into a back and forth argument, and he's insistent that it works. And he doesn't understand that, and he said, well, I wrote this contract, so I know better than anyone else. I said, well, the question isn't what's right about this contract. Okay?
Yeah. Well, look, if the council was acting and had done due diligence and researched the law and realized what their responsibilities are, they would have realized that the 6 people who didn't show up would probably have voted against their appropriation, not because they didn't want to give them the appropriation, but, and I think we posted it, but if you look up Chapter 150E, which is the collective bargaining law, which obviously is the law that public sector employees in the state of Massachusetts have to work under, it clearly states in Section 7, subsection A, first section, and we did this on the last program, but I'll go over it again just to show what the dynamic here. First of all, it explains about a collective bargaining. They can't be any longer than 3 years. It allows you the right to have what they call an evergreen clause, which means that if the contract upon its expiration date has not been renegotiated, that all the elements of that contract stay in full effect until replaced by a successor agreement. So it gives them that right to have an evergreen clause. And then it goes on to say how you execute a contract. It said the 2 parties, in other words, the 2 negotiating parties, which are the City of Fall River, and in this case the Teamsters, have to execute an agreement in writing, which they did. They have to reduce it to writing and sign it, and they did. And then it's a valid contract. So for them to say the contract, it automatically expires if you don't get the money, that's not true, because the only thing about a contract, the stipulation is what constitutes a valid contract. That's a written signed document, which we have. Now, what's contained in a contract is where the issue lies. If you go to subsection B, it talks about that after a contract is executed, the employer, city, i.e. the mayor, is then obligated under that section to submit within 30 days to the appropriate body, which in this case is the city council of the City of Fall River, an appropriation to fund said contract and all elements contained therein. That means he has to submit an appropriation that will cover every single money item and financial liability contained in that contract, which he didn't. There are 2 positions in that contract which are just there. No salary attached. Forget about the description of job duties, how the method of selection for these positions will be, which that's up to the union. If they want to give him a carte blanche to put all his friends in, fine. But they have to have a salary attached. And there were also 2 additional positions that were supposed to be at some point in time added to the DCM. And those positions didn't say they will be entry-level salaries or they will be somewhere within the stipulated salary ranges of the people that are contained in that collective bargaining agreement. So what you had, in essence, is a violation of the law, because that appropriation did not fully fund that collective bargaining agreement or that memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement or anything you want to talk about. So if the council, those 6 councilors were acting in accordance with the law, they would have been obligated to reject that contract, because fundamentally what you're doing is not appropriating the full amount and giving the mayor a blank check for those 2 positions and the additional 2 later on. So he could basically, so what happens now if 2 months down the road the mayor finds 2 of his friends and he says, well, these 2 positions are going to pay $80,000 apiece? And now it goes before the council for additional funding, and they'll say, they say, we're not going to pay that much money for these positions. We can't afford this. The mayor will turn around and say, well, you voted for the contract. You can't. That's the key. You know, the city council members, the 3 that showed up,
The 3 caballeros.
They like to sit there and talk about how everything's wonderful and stuff, but there's a total lack of the applicability of law. You can't appropriate a contract without funding it. And that Section B goes on to say, by the way, that if the council fails to fund it, like they did in Attleboro many years ago, it does not cancel the contract as the mayor put in. It says, the law says, it goes, those financial elements go back to the bargaining table between the city and the union. So, this is the problem. They get up there and they talk like like this is the way it is, and there's a total disregard for the law. And the thing is, and who pays for this? The taxpayer. The taxpayer pays, because now you give it, then they're going to blame the city council. Well, look, we got no money. Well, you appropriated all these contracts, and he gave you half of an appropriation, and then later on he's going to come back with a ton of money he needs and said, well, this is part of the contract you guys approved. Well, go by the law. It's your fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers of the city of Fall River not to ensure that every contract you approve is fully funded. Not too much to ask for the mayor to attach a salary to those positions. Not too much to ask for them to put a salary for the additional 2 positions, not just crew, whatever they call them. But that's the problem, And everybody goes up, oh, you're against. No, they're not against you. I truly believe that those councilors wanted to give you a contract, but they're not doing you a service by doing it in a manner that's not fully funded, and then later on we find out we're out of money, and then there's a big fight, and it's technically illegal because the law's clear. It says it has to be the appropriation for everything contained therein. So, because if you don't appropriate sufficient money to fund a contract, you're giving the mayor a blank check. And that is a violation of your fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers.
Well, you know, the problem I have here, and I have a major problem, I'll be very honest with you, is the fact that the nitwits, the absolute nitwits, who, now I know why. People are sending me text messages that they can barely hear me. Now I know why. might help if I put my mic on.
Yeah.
There you go.
God. Now you got to turn your radio down just a tad.
I know. It's amazing. These absolute nitwits on social media are saying, oh, they need to be recalled. You know, this was a disgrace. This should have never happened, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, in a lot of ways, I agree. I think that these 6 should have shown up and voted no. But then the union would be out of luck.
Yeah.
Okay, but it gets even worse because what I had to excerpt out of that thing, and the city had to excerpt, and I have actual videos that are worse, the 4-letter vulgarities that were coming from the union members, that were coming out, the threats. I'm going to take pictures, I'm going to put up a wall, put you against the wall, you know, F this, F that, was disgusting. The meeting had been adjourned, and that's fine. I understand people get heated, they're upset, because this isn't about the contract. Because, again, people better realize it's about the people around you that are listening. It was said it was about the 245. It was about the 245. Okay? And here's the worst part about it all. Workers that were union members that were out in the hallway were saying, from now on, when those show up and they want to dump some trash, they don't dump a thing unless they got the cash in hand to pay for it. Well, they should have the cash in hand to pay for it anyway.
True.
So I don't see what the problem is. You're doing your job. That's not like it's a threat. Why? Because there were city council. Are you saying that because there were city councils, they were getting preferential treatment and they didn't have to pay the fees? Guess what? That's against the law. That's an ethical violation. Do you really want to go down that road when you say stuff like that?
Well, you know, the other problem you have here is, remember, we always talk about Napoleon, the 2 levers that move men of fear and self-interest. They're fearing they're not going to get their money, and he truly didn't. You know, and I don't blame a lot of those guys because they unfortunately.
No, you can't.
Unfortunately, they were not told. You know, whoever wrote that contract said, "I wrote the contract." Well, you know, I understand that
that was Matt Taibbi.
I understand that the Teamsters are out of Rhode Island and they have different labor laws, and it's also public sector law, which is different than private sector, even in this state. So, but the fact is, when you take on a bargaining unit and you have to work within the parameters of those rules, you should have someone who understands that. And it's like, you know, if you decide to play baseball and you never did, and you decided that you want to run up the third baseline, well, they're not going to let you, because that's not the way we play baseball. So you have to work within the parameters of what you have. So I don't blame them in a lot of ways. But what gets me, and has always gotten me, they don't look at long-range impact. Everybody looks for short-term. We want money, we want money, we want, and that's fine. You know, I mean, I want money too. If they get a pay raise, I want a pay raise. So it's up to the public to stop them. And that in the old days, they used to have wage freezes and nobody got pay raises, including administrators and stuff. But if they get them, I'm a firm believer in going that way. You know, I don't believe in a discrimination against the people who are actually doing the work. So, you know, I don't blame them. But the fact is, you've got to look at what happens. Let's look at what happens. This is what government does. Look at what happened to health care. Health care used to be a mandatory subject of bargaining under 150E. Health care began to become very expensive for cities and towns. But they couldn't get the good health care away from people because it was a negotiating point and it was mandatory. And they would not give it up. I know, because I wouldn't give it up. Firefighters Union was the last union to go to a menu. And I didn't want to go to a menu because I knew the menu was the beginning of what's happened now. They knock out the higher price plan because they say it's too expensive, and they force you to the next plan. Now, all those people go into the next plan and make that one a higher price plan. And now what do we ended up with? We're ending up with virtually one HMO, and they want to shove everybody into one crappy HMO. And we knew that. And then what happened on the state level? Everybody whined. The unions won't give this up. They're going to fight for health care, and they can. They can bargain it collectively. So our great labor-oriented delegation, and every single one of them from down here voted for it.
All Democrats.
They voted to remove elements of the health care bargaining from collective bargaining. And then they created 32B, Section 21 through 23, and then under 19, they created a PEC committee, which has limited, you can vote based on your membership, it's a weighted vote, but it's extremely limited, and then you have to go to a mediation, and then you have to be within 5%. But they basically gutted the healthcare system and our ability to keep it. Because I'll tell you something, we took less money in many cases to maintain our health care. We made concessions to keep good health care. But then when the state turned around and said, we can't get this back, so we'll just take it away from them. We'll change the rules, just like the retirement system. Everybody wants to get an early retirement. Everybody wants, the state runs early retirement things. Everybody, yeah, let's go, I want to get off early. That's fine. Everybody'd like to be like the state police and retire at 50. But what's going to happen now 10 years down the road? All we hear about is the unfunded pension liability. Well, guess what? You're looking at the tree, not the forest. Because 10 or 15 years down the road, when all you young guys are looking and saying, yeah, let them get off early because I can get off early. This will be another Rhode Island. Look what happened to Rhode Island. They eviscerated the retirement system. And that's what will happen in his state. They did it to health care, and somewhere down the road, the state will turn around, and the legislators that you think are your friends will do exactly the same thing to you on the retirement system that they did on the health care system. They'll gut it, and you'll have reduced benefits, and they'll say, we had to do it because it got too expensive. But they'll leave out the part that they're the ones who made it too expensive by giving all kinds of early retirement incentives and pumping young people into the system. Would everybody like to do it? Yeah. But then you have to weigh that. Do you want a system that gives you good benefits, or do you want to break the system and give them an excuse to take things away from you, like they did with health care? This isn't a theory, it's a fact. They've already done it with health care. So wake up and smell the roses. And it's the same thing with contracts. You don't appropriate full amounts of money, and if you don't require that under the law, we're going to break the city.
Well, of course, remember, it was Democrats who did that.
Yep, absolutely.
The same Democrats who gave themselves a 40% pay raise recently.
Exactly.
Okay? So,
And said the taxpayers have to suck it up.
They have to suck it up.
We
That's
have
right.
to pay more.
Got to pay more. Pay more for less. That's the way it is. It's the same in Fall River. We pay more for less. We pay $5,000 more for a ministry of propaganda. I mean, let's be real. People who don't deserve money don't get it, right? No. In Fall River, if you don't deserve the money, you get it. And the guys who do deserve the money have to fight for every penny. But the problem is this. You can fight for every penny, but make sure that the paper that it's on is legal. It's valid. And, what really bothered me was we had a former elected official from another town there who was siding with the union during this process. And even though he acknowledges that we're right, he was still siding with them. And that's okay. Everyone has their position. They have their personal reasons why they need to do it.
Probably half the people that lived in his town.
But the thing is this. When I was having this conversation back and forth with Mr. Taibbi, a woman, I don't know if it was his wife, girlfriend, secretary, whatever, chimed in, well, he knows that contract better than anyone else. He wrote it. You know what? I don't need conversations from the peanut gallery. Okay? I don't need conversations from the peanut gallery. I understand you're there, you're texting away, doing your job, whatever the case may be, But you know what? I'm having the conversation with Mr. Taibbi. And you can have a civil conversation with him, which I think is great. Which I found rather surprising when I got out and started reviewing our web pages, when I saw a comment from him saying, and this is why nobody listens to you. Obviously, people do listen to us. Because you listened to us because you had to make the comment. And some of our biggest detractors know everything we say. So obviously somebody's listening to us.
Yeah, but that's the point. You didn't say anything. You gave them a copy of Cushing's rules. That's not your opinion.
No, exactly.
That's a copy of what the rules of order that they adopted, that they're supposed to be working under, but they want the latitude to just not use the law when it benefits them. It's just like this contract. He may have written a contract, but the contract is not, he did not do his due diligence because he should have known what the law requires in the state of Massachusetts in a collective bargaining agreement, that when that instrument went before the other appropriate authority, i.e. the city council, that he had to allow them the ability to fully fund it, because that's the way the law, and if you put stuff in without a salary, you basically gave them a contract that is jeopardizing the city council's ability to approve it for you. And it's not their fault if they reject it because
That's right.
of that. It's your fault.
But
let me just get this in quickly. I want 2 contract JLMC, Joint Labor Management Commission, the only person in this city, only union ever to go to binding arbitration on 2 collective bargaining agreements. We won both. The first one, we got educational incentives and a whole bunch of other stuff. The second one, we got a whole bunch of other stuff. But if you look at the JLMC, the first thing you have to do when you go to the JLMC is one thing. You have to have your contract totally costed out for every single penny it's going to cost. Then you have to prove the city's ability to pay that cost. That same requirement applies to every contract under 150E. On a JLMC, you have to prove the ability because the city's refusing to give you a contract, and you're going to the JLMC to force the mayor to put it in front of the council. They don't have to appropriate it as the law says, but to force them, but you prove they've got the money. So the thing is, you may have written a contract, but you should have read the law, because you should have put those, attached a salary with those things so they could totally cost it out, because the city council was would have been acting properly to reject it, not because they didn't want to give you that contract, but because you entered a contract without fully costing. I know the firefighters do that because I know the guy who does them. And he is one of the best numbers guys I ever worked with. He was a tremendous asset. He did the numbers for the city, but he also helped us with our numbers. And I know when they go in there, they know what everything costs. That's why I know that, if they went to an arbitration, they'd have their numbers together.
Right.
So you screwed up. And there's no other way to say it. You just screwed up.
It's really sad because everyone, and there was a whole group of people. The usual women were in the chamber. Okay, people out there know who they are, and they were saying, this is terrible. This shouldn't have happened. But you know what? You're right. Okay, maybe they should have showed up. Okay, but the one thing that this mayor always seems to forget, the one thing that these people that are in the chamber seem to forget, this country has what we call a Separation of Powers Act. An executive, legislative, and judicial. And for some reason, it doesn't apply in Fall River. It makes me sick. Don't act with your heart, act with your head. And that's why Fall River's in the crap hole it's in, because you keep voting with your heart and your stomach for a chow mein sandwich or a ham and bean dinner. It's disgusting.
Well, we got on a lot of issues why it should have been done, but let's get to the original issue. What you presented them, Cushing's, that meeting should have never been called in the first place.
Exactly.
That's the bottom line. So stay angry and stay informed.
And remember, try to think with your heart, right? No, try to think with your head. Use some common sense. It works better that way. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on Friday.
Stay angry. Remember what they tell you in court. Ignorance of the law is not a defense.